The Starship Unity's Reach floated silently through space, its silver body shining like a star among the darkness. Inside, it was a city of many species, all living and working together. Peace between alien races was not easy, but this ship was a symbol of hope, a place where humans and aliens could learn from each other. Lisa, a young trainee from the Scifi race, walked carefully down a long corridor. She held a small tablet in one hand and looked at the signs on the walls. Scifi were tall, elegant beings with smooth, scaled skin and sharp golden eyes. They moved with grace and always followed the rules. But Lisa was different. She was curious, too curious, some said. Instead of going straight to her assigned meeting room for diplomacy training, she had wandered down a hallway she had never seen before. The map on her tablet had glitched, and now she was lost. She sighed and looked around. Then she saw a door slightly open. Strange sounds were coming from inside, buzzing, clanking, something spinning fast. Light flickered from behind the door like small blue sparks. She stepped closer, hesitated, and peeked inside. It was not a meeting room. It looked like a human workshop. Tables were filled with strange tools, wires, and metal parts. Screens showed blinking numbers and spinning shapes. In the middle of the room, a human sat on the floor surrounded by machines. He wore a brown uniform with oil stains on it. His black hair was messy, and he had a patch with the name M. Reyes on his chest. He held a tool in one hand and was fixing something that looked like a broken drone. His fingers moved quickly, connecting wires and adjusting tiny pieces with care. He didn't notice her at first. Lisa stood there, frozen. She knew she should leave. This was a mistake. But the way he worked, it was fascinating. His face was calm, focused, as if nothing else in the world mattered except that machine. Suddenly, the drone made a sharp beep. Marco looked up and saw her. "Oh," he said, blinking in surprise. "Didn't see you there." Lisa stepped back quickly. I'm sorry. I took a wrong turn. I didn't mean to disturb you." He smiled. "No disturbance. Just working on this stubborn little thing. You Scifi?" She nodded, unsure what to say. Marco wiped his hands on a cloth and stood up. "I'm Lieutenant Marco Reyes, engineer, 3rd Deck Maintenance Team." "Lisa, Scifi diplomatic trainee," she replied, still standing near the door. "Well, Lisa," he said, motioning to the machine, "you just walked into the messiest room on the ship. Congratulations." She smiled a little at that. "What is that device?" "This? Just a scout drone. It shorted during a storm test yesterday. I'm trying to fix the guidance module before the next round." Lisa stepped inside, just a little. "May I see?" Marco shrugged. "Sure, come on in. Just watch your step. That thing on the floor might bite." Lisa gave a soft laugh and stepped carefully over wires and tools. She crouched beside the table, looking at the drone. It had 4 legs, small cameras, and a black, metal body. She could see where parts were removed and others replaced. The work was chaotic, but clever. "Scifi don't repair like this," she said. "I know," Marco replied. "You folks use clean rooms and perfect tools. Me? I use what I've got and hope nothing explodes." She tilted her head. "Doesn't that feel unsafe?" He chuckled. "That's half the fun." Lisa studied the drone more closely. "But it works?" Marco held up a wire and nodded. "Almost. I just need to reset the stabilizer, and it should be good as new. Want to see?" Before she could answer, he pressed a button. The drone's eyes lit up with a soft blue glow. It lifted its legs, balanced, then took a few steps. Lisa's eyes widened. "You did that with all this mess?" Marco grinned. "Yep. Humans call it making do. We're pretty good at it." She looked around the room again. It was full of disorder, but there was beauty in it too, like a puzzle in motion. And the human who solved it, he was different from what she expected. "I should go," she said suddenly, looking at the time on her tablet. "I'm late." "No problem," Marco said. "If you get lost again, this is probably the noisiest Room on the deck, easy to find. Lissa hesitated at the door. Thank you for showing me. Marco gave a small wave. Anytime. She walked away, but not quickly. As the door closed behind her, she looked back once. The sound of tools and machines echoed faintly through the hall, and for some reason her heart felt lighter. She had walked into the wrong room, but maybe it wasn't a mistake after all. The next morning, Lissa found herself walking the same strange corridor again. She did not plan it, but something inside her urged her onward. She saw the door to the workshop slightly ajar and paused at the threshold. The sounds of clinking metal and low humming called to her like a soft invitation. She took a small breath, stepped inside, and smiled as Marco looked up from his bench. Back so soon? He asked with a friendly grin, his brow still dusted with fine metal shavings. Lissa nodded. I lost something, she said, even though she knew it was not true. I thought I might find it here. Marco laughed and stood, brushing off his hands on a rag. Well, you found me instead. Have a seat. He patted a nearby crate. Lissa sat, crossing her long legs carefully, her golden eyes bright with curiosity. Marco held up a small round device. Wires curled around its edges, and a single lens glowed faintly. This is a microgravity modulator, he explained. I'm trying to make a pocket of low gravity for supply transfers. It could let us move heavy cargo in small spaces without so much effort. Lissa leaned forward. That sounds ingenious. On Sarathi vessels, we use magnetic rails or anti-gravity plates. Always expensive and heavy. He smiled. Right. Humans like to keep it light and cheap. We jury-rig solutions with parts we find lying around. It might be messy, but it works well enough. She studied the modulator's coils and switches. How does it stabilize? Marco guided her fingers to a small dial. Here's the balance control. I tune it to my weight. Then it holds that setting even if the temperature shifts. Watch. He flipped a switch. The device hummed louder, then hovered above the table. Lissa watched in amazement as the modulator rotated slowly in midair. It floats, she exclaimed, her voice soft with wonder. Marco's grin grew wider. That it does. Now I just need to make it safe enough for other crew. I've had a few sparks. Lissa laughed at the thought of sparks flying. I would worry about overheating. He shrugged. A little heat never hurt anyone. Except maybe the guy whose hand got singed. He tapped his own finger, where a small burn mark showed. Lissa's eyes widened. You let yourself get hurt? Part of the job, he said lightly, though his voice held no regret. If I waited for perfect conditions, nothing would ever get built. I learn as I go. She admired his attitude. That is very human of you, she said. On the Sarathi homeworld, we study theory for years before ever touching a tool. You just do it. Marco leaned back. Theory is good, but sometimes you have to dive in, see what fails, then fix it better. He tapped the modulator again and it steady glowed in response. Lissa felt a spark of excitement. May I help? She asked, surprising herself. Sure, Marco said, handing her a small screwdriver. Hold this coil in place while I tighten this clamp. Her scaled fingers curled around the tool and she followed his careful instructions. They worked side by side, her precise grip and his quick adjustments bringing the device into perfect alignment. Every so often their hands brushed and both paused, smiles flickering between them. When the modulator glowed brighter and held its position securely, Marco let out a soft whistle. Looks good. Lissa stepped back and studied their work. It is stable, she said. Thank you. He shook his head. No, thank you. You have a steady hand. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of metal shaped like a star. Here, a little gift. It's cut from spare plating. Think of it as a token of our partnership. She accepted it, feeling its cool weight. I will treasure it, she promised, tucking it into her uniform pocket. A quiet alarm sounded from Lissa's tablet. Her chest tightened as she saw the reminder. Diplomatic briefing in 5 minutes. She stood, brushing imaginary dust from her skirt. Her stomach felt heavy. "I'm late," she said, looking at Marco with regret. "I must go." He nodded, hiding a small look of disappointment. "Don't worry. I'll be her. Curious, if you get lost again, just follow the noise." Lisa stepped toward the door, then turned back once more. The workshop was a jumble of tools and parts, but it felt alive, full of energy and promise, and at its heart stood a human engineer who saw obstacles as puzzles to solve. With one last look, she slipped out, closing the door gently behind her. The corridor seemed quieter without the workshop's buzz, but Lisa's mind buzzed with new ideas. She touched the star-shaped metal in her pocket and smiled to herself. Lisa returned to the strange corridor the day after her second visit. She walked with purpose now, though she still told herself she was looking for a lost data chip. When she reached the workshop door, it stood half open, just as before. The low hum of machines and the soft light from the bench welcomed her. Inside, Marco looked up from his work and smiled. "Back again so soon?" he asked. Lisa stepped in and closed the door gently. "I thought I might learn more about your work," she said. He waved her over to a small table in the corner. Marco spread out a pair of trays he had readied earlier. Each held simple rations, fruit cubes, protein bars, and a flask of tea. Lisa had never eaten at the human workshop before, and she studied the food with interest. "In Scifi chambers, we have nutrient gels and protein discs," she explained, picking up a fruit cube. "But this tastes fresh." She bit into the snack and smiled. Marco laughed, pleased. "I know humans love fresh food. You get energy and taste at the same time." Lisa nodded, savoring the flavor. Together they ate in companionable silence as the machines hummed around them. When they finished, Lisa opened her tablet. "I have questions," she said. "Why do you keep your tools out in the open?" She tapped the bench where wrenches, pliers, and soldering irons lay in a haphazard pile. "Wouldn't it be safer to lock them away?" Marco stood and began to pick up the tools, placing each one back on a magnetic strip above the bench. "You're right," he said. "I should keep things organized. But sometimes I need to reach for something fast. A little mess helps me. See what I need." Lisa watched him arrange the tools. Even in his mess, there was a careful order. She frowned thoughtfully. "On Scifi ships, every tool has its place. If one item is out of place, we stop all work and reorder. It keeps mistakes low." Marco stepped back and turned the lights down. "Mistakes can teach you, though," he said quietly. "If everything is perfect, you miss chances to learn." Lisa tapped her tablet and pulled up a Scifi engineering manual. "We study theory first. Then we test. Then we test again." She showed him diagrams of precise assembly lines, each step mapped. Marco nodded, impressed. "Your way is very disciplined. My way is more trial and error." An alarm bell chimed in the corridor. Lisa jumped. She glanced at her tablet, a reminder for her diplomacy training. Her expression grew tense. Marco noticed and wore a concerned look. "You don't have to go," he said softly. "Stay if you want." Lisa shook her head. "I must," she whispered. She stood and stepped toward the door, but then paused. "Marco, why do you risk so much? Why do you climb into vents and handle live wires?" His eyes grew distant as he answered. "Because if I don't, the ship stops working, people suffer, I like to help." Lisa considered his words. She saw how his hands moved, precise yet fast, fixing one problem after another. She remembered the story he had told her about Earth's early days, how people built engines from scrap metal and old tools. "Humans build from what they have," she said. "You learn by doing." Marco's face lit up. "Exactly," he said. "If we waited for the perfect part, nothing ever moved." He gave her a small nod of pride. Lisa smiled back, feeling warmth in her chest, a mix of admiration and something new she could not name. Suddenly, the door hissed open behind her, and a Scifi officer stepped in. She had tall, sleek scales and wore a crisp uniform. "Lisa," the officer called, her voice sharp. "This is the third time you have been found in the human sector. Return to your briefing immediately. Lisa's heart pounded. She looked at Marco, who gave her a quick nod of understanding. Lisa bowed her head to the officer. Yes, High Officer Drenna, she said softly. Drenna's golden eyes flicked to Marco, then back to Lisa. Do not disobey orders again, she warned, and swept out of the room. As the door closed, Marco exhaled a low whistle. That was intense, he said quietly. Lisa shook off her uniform jacket and looked around the workshop. I did not mean to break rules, she said, but I want to understand. Marco smiled and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Then we will learn together, he said. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with renewed determination. She would balance Sarathi order with human creativity. She would keep learning, and she would find a way to return to this room without fear. The machines hummed, and the lights glowed softly, and at the heart of the workshop, two very different engineers, one human, one Sarathi, prepared to bridge the gap between their worlds. Late one afternoon, Lisa walked toward the diplomatic wing of Unity's Reach. She had just finished a briefing on trade negotiations. The corridors were calm and bright, with soft lights under the ceiling. Crew members passed by in quiet focus. Lisa felt a familiar tug in her pocket where the little star-shaped metal token rested. She smiled at the thought of Marco, the human engineer who had become her friend. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A low alarm began to sound. Red strips glowed along the corridor floor. Lisa's heart pounded. She knew something was wrong. An automated voice announced, "Power fluctuation detected. Life support in Deck 7 is at risk." Lisa gasped. The diplomatic wing used life support like any other area. If it failed, people could lose air and warmth. Without thinking, she broke into a run. She turned a corner and saw smoke drifting out of a nearby junction box. Sparks flew from a panel on the wall. Two technicians backed away, eyes wide with worry. Lisa pressed a button on her tablet to call for Marco. "Marco, power surge in Deck 7, she shouted into the comm line. His calm voice came back. "I'll meet you at the maintenance hatch. Stay safe." Lisa found Marco waiting by a grated door marked Maintenance Access. He wore his brown uniform and a portable light on his helmet. His face was serious, but his eyes showed determination. "We need to reroute power from Deck 9 to keep life support running here," he said. "The main conduit is damaged. We'll have to do it by hand." Lisa nodded, though she felt fear rise in her chest. Together, they slid open the heavy hatch. Inside, the corridor was dark except for their helmet lights. Pipes and wires ran along the ceiling like the veins of a giant machine. The air smelled of heated metal and oil. Marco pointed to a set of thick cables leading to a control box. "We'll rewire through this box," he said. "Lisa, can you hold the scope steady while I splice the line?" She swallowed and approached the box. The metal was warm to her touch. Marco knelt beside the cables, toolkit open at his side. Sparks flickered where wires had shorted out. He worked quickly, cutting and stripping wires, twisting new connectors into place. Lisa held the scope, shining its light exactly where he needed it. She watched his hands move fast and sure. Every so often, a rev of electricity made the box buzz and Lisa jumped. Yet Marco did not slow down. As they worked, the alarm grew louder. A red glow came through a vent ahead, showing smoke curling into the hallway. The ship's automated. Voice repeated the warning. "Life support levels critical." Lisa's breath came faster. She looked at Marco's face. Beads of sweat stood on his brow, but he smiled at her. "Almost there," he said. "Give me the splice kit." She handed it over. He reached into the glowing cables. One wire hissed and snapped. A burst of light flared at the connection. Lisa gasped and stumbled back, clenching her teeth. Marco's hand was momentarily blurred by the spark. He did not cry out. He twisted the ends together and locked the connector. "Got it," he said, voice steady. He flipped a switch inside the box. The lights in the maintenance tunnel flickered, then returned to normal. The alarm stopped its frantic beep. Marco and Lissa heard the hum of life support coming. Back online, Lissa exhaled, feeling relief flood through her body. "We did it," she said, her voice trembling. Marco nodded and gave a small laugh. "Power failsafe," he said. "Not as neat as Scifi procedure, but it works." They stood in the narrow tunnel, breathing heavily. The heat around the box began to cool. Lissa pressed her hand to her chest. "You risked your life," she said softly. "You could have been hurt." Marco shrugged. "I didn't think. I just did what needed to be done." He offered his hand and helped her to stand. Their fingers touched briefly, and Lissa felt a warm spark of something new. Back in the main corridor, the red lights were gone. Crew members ran past, heading to check systems. Some waved and thanked them as they hurried by. A senior officer stopped in front of Lissa and Marco. "Excellent work," he said, his voice firm but proud. "You saved the diplomatic wing. The entire crew owes you gratitude." Lissa looked at Marco, whose cheeks were slightly flushed. He gave her a quick nod. That night, Lissa stood by the window of her quarters looking out at the stars. She clutched the star-shaped token in her hand. Her mind replayed every detail. The sparks, the darkness of the tunnel, Marco's calm strength. She thought of how he had stepped into danger without a second thought. A soft smile spread across her face. She had learned the true meaning of human grit and generosity. Lissa placed the token on her bedside table. She lay down and closed her eyes, feeling safe and inspired. Tomorrow she would return to the workshop. She would learn more from Marco, about engineering and about courage, and she would carry the memory of their shared moment forever. Lissa arrived at the workshop early the next morning. The corridor lights glowed soft white. She paused before the door, feeling a mix of excitement and unease. Inside, Marco was already at his bench, tinkering with a small device. He looked up and smiled. "Morning, Lissa," he said. "I was just making a multi-tool prototype. Want to help?" Lissa stepped inside, but she did not move toward the tools right away. She clutched the star-shaped token in her pocket and let it calm her. "Marco," she said, "we need to talk." His smile faded into concern. "Everything all right?" She nodded and drew close to the bench. "I heard rumors," she whispered. "Some Scifi think I am spending too much time here. They call it inappropriate fraternization." Marco set down his soldering iron. He looked puzzled. "Fraternization?" Lissa took a breath. "Spending time with humans is not common for a diplomatic trainee. My superior sent a message. Stop this at once or face consequences." Her eyes shone with frustration. "They say I am betraying my duty." Marco reached out and gently touched her arm. "Your duty, or their fear? You're learning something new. That should be celebrated, not forbidden." Lissa's shoulders relaxed. His words sounded true. "On Scifi ships," she said, "we follow strict codes of conduct. We do not mix personal and professional lives. Feelings are kept in check." She paused, searching his face. "But I feel something more than respect." Marco's eyes softened. "I feel it too." He smiled. "Scifi code or human code. Maybe we need a new code." Lissa let out a small laugh. She loved how he could turn any problem into a puzzle to solve. "What is this tool you are building?" she asked, leaning closer to the bench. Marco lifted a nearly finished device. It looked like a small cylinder with a glowing end and several fold-out tools. "A self-calibrating torque wrench," he explained. "It adjusts its grip automatically for different materials, useful for quick repairs in the field." She reached out and turned the cylinder in her hand. It was light, perfectly balanced. "It feels right," she said. "Better than my Scifi precision wrench." Marco grinned. "Try it out." He handed her a loose bolt on the bench. Lissa placed the wrench around it. The tool clicked, adjusted, and tightened the bolt in one smooth motion. She felt the power and grace in its design. "It works perfectly," she said, amazed. "How did you make it so?" She searched for words. "Intuitive?" Marco tapped the side of the wrench. "A little human improvisation, a little Sarathi inspiration. I studied your manual on adaptive mechanics. Then I added a sensor from my old drone parts. It's a mix." Lissa held the wrench carefully. "A mix," she repeated, smiling. "You took two worlds and made something new." Marco nodded. "That's engineering, and maybe life too." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, polished piece of metal shaped like a gear. "I want you to have this." Lissa took it. The metal was cool and smooth, each tooth of the gear perfectly carved. "It is beautiful," she said. "What is it?" He tapped the gear. "A personal key for my workshop console. It lets you access my design files and tool inventory. Think of it as permission to build whenever you want." Lissa's heart raced. "Permission?" Marco laughed softly. "You already have it, but now you have a token. A gear for the machine." She pressed the gear into her palm. "Thank you," she whispered. "I will not lose this." He placed his hand over hers for a moment. Their fingers brushed, sending warmth through them both. Lissa looked into his eyes and felt something shift inside. She remembered the warnings and the rules, but in that moment rules seemed small beside what she felt. A soft chime came from the workshop console. Marco moved to override the alarm. "Duty calls," he said, stepping back. "I have to test these new calibrations. You coming?" Lissa nodded and followed him. They worked side by side, tightening fittings, adjusting sensors, and testing each function of the wrench. Every now and then their hands met and they shared a brief smile. When the tests finished, the wrench glowed green. Marco let out a low whistle. "Never fails," he said proudly. Lissa looked at the tool in her hand, then at Marco's face. "I think we made something extraordinary," she said softly. He nodded, his gaze steady and warm. She put the gear and the wrench into her pocket. "Tomorrow," she said, "I will show this to my superior. I will tell her why it matters." Marco gave her a firm nod of support. "Tell her we made it together," he said. Lissa felt courage bloom inside her. She would face the Sarathi, code, the warnings, and the unknown. Because sometimes doing what was right meant breaking old rules and building new ones. As she left the workshop that day, Lissa paused at the door. She looked back at Marco, standing amid his machines. The Dimao room was a jumble of parts, lights, and tools, perfect chaos. She smiled, touching the gear in her pocket. Whatever came next, she knew one thing for certain. She would not walk away from this new world she and Marco were creating. An urgent klaxon woke every corner of Unity's reach. Red lights pulsed along the corridors. A cold voice echoed through the ship's intercom. "Unauthorized system lock in progress, all decks initiating lockdown." Crew members froze in place. Doors sealed shut with a hiss. Life support and navigation systems powered down. Panic fluttered in Lysa's chest, but she did not hesitate. She knew where to go. Lysa sprinted toward the central engineering hub. Her Sarathi uniform caught on edges of the walls, but she pressed on. In her pocket, the star-shaped token felt like a promise. As she turned a corner, she nearly ran into Marco. He was dashing in the opposite direction with a toolkit clutched under his arm. His eyes met hers, calm even in chaos. "Sabotage," Marco said in a low voice. "Somebody locked the core controls and set a timer. We have minutes before the fusion reactor shuts down for good." He tapped his comm unit. "Lissa, I need your help with the encryption panel. I'll handle the mechanical override." She nodded and ran beside him. They reached the blast doors protecting the engine room. Red alarm lights flickered on the thick metal. Marco held a handheld scanner up to the control console. Sparks flew, where cables had been cut. He pressed tools into wires, forming quick circuits. "That's one lock," he muttered, twisting a bare wire into place. "But the main gate is digital." Lissa stepped forward, her Sarathi training in codes coming alive. She placed her slender fingers on the touchpad, Lines of alien script glowed on the screen. As Marco worked on the hardware, Lissa read the symbols. She spoke softly to herself. Shift cipher, reverse loop, add prime. Each code barrier fell under her steady focus. Sweat beaded at her brow, but she held it firm. Finally, she pressed enter. The screen blinked green. Gate control unlocked, she said, voice steady. They pushed the heavy doors together. Inside, the engine room was bathed in orange light. Plasma coils glowed with unstable energy. Pipes hissed steam. The fusion core sat in the center, a glowing sphere surrounded by metal rings. A timer on a nearby console read 002:45 and ticking down. The reactor would shut off and the ship would drift without power. Marco sprinted to a panel of levers and valves. He pulled one handle, then another, rerouting coolant flow toward the core. But the system groaned under pressure. A pipe burst, spraying hot steam across the floor. Lissa jumped back, nearly slipping on the wet metal. "Careful," she cried. Marco ducked under the spray and tightened a flange with a wrench salvaged from his kit. Lissa saw another console locked with a different cipher. She hurried over and matched the patterns she had seen earlier. "Plasma regulator release now," she called. Marco heard her and flipped a switch. The reactor's glow steadied. The shaking slowed. Above them, the main overhead doors began to open, letting in fresh air. Only 30 seconds remained on the timer. Marco ran to the control console and pulled the big red lever. The core's hum deepened and then smoothed into a steady beat. The countdown froze. Lights in the room returned to white. Alarms fell silent. Crew members outside cheered as the doors lifted fully. Life support and power grids came back online. Lissa exhaled so hard that her shoulders shook. Marco placed a hand on her arm. "We did it," he said, relief in his voice. She smiled, wiping her brow. "Your codes and your hands." She replied, "We worked together." He nodded and gave her a small, tired grin. At that moment, she felt more than pride. She felt something warm and bright like the reactor they had just saved. Later, in the quiet aftermath, high-ranking officers praised Lissa's skill and Marco's bravery. They stood side by side as the crew applauded. Lissa held the star-shaped token in her hand and then the gear key in her pocket. She looked at Marco and he caught her gaze with a soft smile. No words were needed. Together they had forged a bond stronger than any lock or code, and they had proved that two very different worlds could unite to save them all. The day after the reactor crisis, Unity's Reach held a formal ceremony in the main atrium. Rows of officers from many species stood in neat lines, their uniforms bright under the soft lights. Lissa and Marco stood side by side at the front, each holding a small medal. The ship's captain spoke in a clear voice, praising their courage and skill. "You have saved us all through your unity," she said. When the speech ended, the crowd cheered. Lissa felt a rush of pride as she clasped the medal to her uniform. Marco's smile was gentle and proud. Later, in a private meeting, Lissa's Sarathi superiors offered her a promotion. They wanted her to return to the Sarathi homeworld, to lead a new diplomatic team and share the lessons she had learned. The promotion was a great honor. She bowed her head in respect. "I am grateful," she said, "for this trust." Yet inside, Lissa's heart felt heavy. She thought of the workshop, of the tools, of the laughter and quiet moments shared with Marco. That evening, after the formal dinners and speeches, Lissa walked through the corridors alone. The ship had returned to normal pace. Machines hummed. Crew members moved briskly and the stars shone through the viewports. Her hand went to the gear key in her pocket, the one Marco had given her. It felt like a part of her now. She paused before the workshop door and hesitated. The soft glow and low hum beyond the door felt like home. Lissa opened the door and found Marco packing away his tools. He looked up, surprise and relief in his eyes. "Lissa," he said softly, "is everything all right?" She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. The room smelled of metal and oil, but also of promise. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the promotion letter. Holding it with both hands, she looked at Marco. "I must go home," she said quietly. "They expect me to leave tonight." Marco set down a wrench and stepped closer. "If you go," he said, "this room will feel empty. We will both miss what we built." His voice was calm, but she heard the worry. Lisa looked around at the scattered tools and half-finished projects. Each one held a memory. The drone, the modulator, the torque wrench, the reactor override. She thought of the days they had spent side by side, combining Scifi precision with human freedom. She took a deep breath and met his eyes. "I realized something important," she said. "I walked into this room by mistake, but every choice after that has been mine. I choose to stay." Marco's face lit up, and he reached out to take her hand. She put the letter on the bench and let her fingers rest in his. "I choose you," she added, "and this new life we have begun." Marco smiled and closed the distance between them. He wrapped his arms around her in a gentle hug. Lisa felt safe and happy. She had no home. World waiting for her tonight, or maybe her home was here with him. She pressed the gear key in her pocket and felt its cool weight. "Can I stay here?" she whispered. "With you?" He held her at arm's length and looked into her eyes. "There's always room here," he said. "We can make a space for you, your own station in this workshop, and if you like, a shared cabin down the hall." Lisa laughed softly, relief and joy mingling in her chest. "I'd like that," she said. Very much. Over the next hours, they cleared a corner of the workshop. Marco brought a small cot, a light, and a shelf from storage. Lisa arranged her belongings, her tablet, books on Scifi history, and the star-shaped token. She set the promotion letter next to the gear key, not as a choice she rejected, but as a symbol of what she had overcome. The room felt warmer now, a mix of human grit and Scifi order. As the last tool found its place on the bench, Lisa looked at Marco and smiled. "Thank you," she said simply. He nodded and placed his hand on her shoulder. Together they stood among the machines and parts, a perfect blend of two worlds. In that quiet workshop, on a ship sailing among the stars, Lisa and Marco began the next chapter of their lives. Outside the window, the vast galaxy stretched on. Inside, two hearts beat in time with the soft hum of machines. The future held new challenges, diplomatic missions, technical puzzles, and perhaps more moments of danger. But Lisa knew she would never face them alone. Here, in the room that had brought them together, there was always room for two.